right, well, welcome everyone. For those of you who don't, I see a lot of faces here who we see a lot at Lippman House, and others who we don't see quite as often, so it's great to have you all here at the Nieman Foundation. My name is Josh Benton. I'm director of the Nieman Journalism Lab here at the Nieman Foundation, and I'm very pleased to have you all here for what I expect will be a very enlightening discussion with some of the great leaders of the Boston Globe who are trying a new strategy that we're going to get into. It was almost exactly 1 year ago today that the Boston Globe first announced that it was going to be digitally splitting itself into two. Boston.com, which I'm sure many of you have had the occasion to read in the last few years, as it's been around since the mid-1990s. By all accounts, about as successful as a regional news website can be in the United States. The announcement was made it was going to be losing most of its content from the Boston Globe print newspaper. And a new site, bostonglobe.com, was going to become the home of the newspaper online and offer a premium experience. And along with that premium experience was going to come a premium price tag, which turned out to be $3.99 a week, which isn't, it's $4. It's not that much, but nonetheless, it's a lot. It's $4 higher than most people are used to paying for news online.
Is it more than zero's premium these days? Exactly. Is that the thought, the common wisdom?
The 1 cent premium.
Right.
BostonGlobe.com, which just launched 2 weeks ago today, is a beautiful site. It's a functional site. It has a lot of great content, but it's not yet clear that beauty and functionality and great content a business model make in the online news world. Sadly, it's going to take a lot of effort to try and convince people to pay for something that they've been receiving for free. The struggles of the newspaper industry more broadly are well known by this point. Advertising revenues for the industry have declined for 20 consecutive quarters. Circulation has declined all across the business. And while ad dollars are generally on the increase on the online side of things, they're not increasing at the rate that you would need to counterbalance the declines on the print side. Pundits have long talked about the difficulty of replacing print dollars with digital dimes. I think the Globe strategy is one of the more interesting attempts at trying to add a print-like approach in some ways to an online context. This new strategy touches on a lot of issues of great interest to the entire news industry. How best do you tailor an experience for mobile customers where an increasing number of readers are engaging with news content? What are the kinds of journalism you can afford to charge for, and what are the kinds that you pretty much have to leave out there for free? Are people willing to pay for a premium experience, not just premium content, but a different way of reading? And how can newspapers convince advertisers that their audience is worth paying a premium to access? We're very lucky tonight to have 4 leaders of the Globe to talk with us about the strategy. My far left, Chris Mayer is publisher of the Globe. He's been at the paper since 1984 and has ultimate responsibility for just about everything when you think about it. Next to him is Marty Baron. Marty just concluded his 10th year as editor of the Globe. He runs the news side of the operation and has worked at a number of other fine newspapers such as the New York Times and the Miami Herald. Lisa DeSisto is the Chief Advertising Officer for Boston Globe Media and General Manager overseeing Boston.com. She's worked in a variety of roles on the business side of the Globe's web operations since 1995. And Michael Manning is the Director of Product Management at the Globe and Boston.com and played a big part in the birth of BostonGlobe.com on the technology side. He's been at the paper since 1999. That's right. Well, we'll talk through some of these issues up here, and then we're going to leave plenty of time for all of you to have questions. Newspaper readers tend to be very engaged questioners of their newspapers, so you have the opportunity to talk to some of the people responsible for the products that you enjoy.
Bless you.
Let me start off with Chris, the very polite Chris, who just blessed a member of the audience. Newspapers have been talking about paywalls for a very long time. It's been a number of years that we've been hearing newspapers say we need to find a way to charge for content. And really, 2011 seems to be the year in which a number of newspapers are finally deciding it's time to no longer just talk about it, but to actually do it. Most notably, the New York Times, your sister newspaper, starting 6 months ago, their new digital subscription model. My old newspaper, the Dallas Morning News, starting one a few months before that. The Baltimore Sun, just a few days ago, announcing something similar. What do you think it is about this particular moment that has encouraged news organizations to finally say, we think we can make this work, we can start charging for content?
Well, I think there's 2 forces at work right now that are helping that along. One is that there is an increased willingness to pay for digital content. Things, you see that whether you're seeing the success that the New York Times has had with their model, or you see it just in the app world. People are paying for digital things that they enjoy, or for things that just make their lives easier. And the form factor matters, and the adoption, the high adoption rate of the tablet, building on top of the trend that was already happening in mobile. I think institutions figuring out how to direct what the content that they produce or the journalism that's there to a form factor that works on the device is something that is consistent with the way people are looking to pay. So I think you've got that increased willingness to pay, and then you just have the proliferation of the technology to where it really has become a mainstream alternative to reading the newspaper. And the newspaper isn't going away. We still have hundreds of thousands of people who read it every single day. But the adoption rate for reading it digitally is now no longer really just a handful of sort of the early adopters. And really, I look at the tablet as giving a big enough form factor to be able to read and enough portability to be able to take it to places where one would want to be able to read a newspaper or and use this as an alternative. So I think those two things converging have made this a time in which people are thinking it's going to be more successful to deliver these products now.
In announcing BostonGlobe.com, you described the research that you've done with your audience and how there are two large groups of customers that Boston.com and BostonGlobe.com are targeting. The words, I can't remember if this was a Boston Globe reporter or you who was using these particular words, but on one hand, casual and occasional visitors interested in quickly accessing listings, classifieds, and specific articles, and on the other, committed readers who immerse themselves in stories provided by Globe journalists for the newspaper. The problem that a lot of news organizations face is that there are a lot of people in Group A and not nearly as many people in Group B. And as newspapers have discussed paywall strategies, a lot of them have said, we hope to get 2%, 3%, 4% of our online unique visitors per month who we might be willing to pay. Is in your research, is that the scale of adoption that you think is likely or possible for BostonGlobe.com? Or do you think that there is a chance of it becoming a more mainstream product than that?
I think it's going to. The short answer is the latter. I think it has. I think the products that we launch under the Boston Globe brand, and BostonGlobe.com is certainly the first front door for the Boston Globe in the digital space. I think those do have the opportunity to become mainstream reads as we find other ways to connect with an audience, and as the readers are using more technology to be able to read. Ultimately, what we're looking at, though, is the overall reach and the overall audience. So in print right now, we have just under 25% penetration. But if you look at our overall penetration in the marketplace between print and digital, it's about 47%. So we're reaching about half of the readers or the adults in our primary geography here, and that just creates the opportunity for us to deliver those reading experiences. And the research confirmed that there is an increased willingness to pay that's been shown over time, and it is very closely equated to the value that they place on it. And for us, I think I appreciate your comments about the reading experience for BostonGlobe.com. It's the journalism, but it's giving it that really terrific reading experience that is something that differentiates it from what you could find as an alternative, whether that's an alternative on Boston.com for some of the information we share, or an alternative from any other information source.
How realistic do you think that is, though, given that you're providing a free alternative to BostonGlobe.com, which features a lot of the content from the Globe's collection of reporters and journalists, not all of it, but a significant chunk of it, and is a very popular site that people have been trained to use for a decade and a half at this point?
It is a very popular site, and what we found from the research is that people are certainly using it, but they're using it for a very there's a significant audience that's using it for a very different reason than reading the Boston Globe online. That there is an audience that's reading the Boston Globe online using Boston.com, or prior to the launch of BostonGlobe.com, who are using Boston.com to read the Boston Globe in the digital space, and it wasn't a very enjoyable reading experience. And so it was that group that we primarily focused on with the reading experience. I think the two other quick comments on that. One is the reality continues to be that digital adoption is replacing print readership. And so as we watch our readership base move from print to digital, we need to have a solution, whether that's a solution that allows all of our print subscribers to also read digital to figure out in this transition how it connects with their lives, or to take a Sunday home delivery because that's what fits, and then digital the rest of the week. It's letting the consumers and the readers start to figure out how does it make sense to consume. And I just want to touch base quickly on the fact, the statement that you made around that most of the content is on Boston.com. In fact, 3/4 of what gets produced out of the newsroom is available only in summary form on Boston.com.
Right.
And so for the full reading experience, which is all of the journalism, all of the storytelling, everything that's in the paper, and then some because of the multimedia capabilities, and that reading experience that does not inundate one with advertisements, that does move very seamlessly from device to device, you'd have to go to bostonglobe.com.
Marty, let me move to you. I can imagine as someone who used to work in a newspaper newsroom that if suddenly a paywall were to be erected between my digital readers and my content, that I might have two different reactions. On one hand, I could imagine this is great that my content now has a value assigned to it, a financial value, and by gosh, our work is worth paying for. On the other hand, I might be a little bit upset. There are a lot of people who would have read my stories if they were on a free site that aren't going to read them now. What's the reaction been like in the newsroom?
The reaction in the newsroom has been entirely positive. As Chris said, the Boston Globe has not had its front door to the rest of the world. It's been an important part of Boston.com, but it's been just a part of Boston.com. So this is really the first time that the Globe itself has had its own site that's sort of a full, robust representation of what the newspaper itself is. And really is a newspaper sort of updated to the minute with the same sort of sensibilities and values and look and feel and all of that. So I think people feel very good about that. They want both of these sites to be successful. They want Boston.com to be very successful because it has been very successful, as you pointed out. In fact, last month we had 7 million unique visitors. We've been talking about 6 million, so we got up to 7 million. Let's see if we can try to keep it there. But
Depend
so
on
that's
the Sox.
yes. Well,
the weather.
hurricanes are helpful for traffic. So it wasn't all the quality, but it was the quality of the coverage.
Right,
so
exactly.
So we want that free site, but we also we like the idea of having a site that is a robust representation of the newspaper. And look, we have a so-called paywall around our journalism. It's called what people pay for the newspaper already. It's not like this is a novel concept. It's actually an age-old concept. So this is really applying that concept to the digital space. Mm-hmm. And I think people feel good about it. And they also are hopeful that this brings in additional revenue to the company because if the company is successful, that means we'll be able to continue doing the kind of journalism that we want to do.
In part of the development of BostonGlobe.com was figuring out what was going to be free on Boston.com, what was going to remain behind the paywall, and you made the decision that most sports content was going to be available free on Boston.com, as well as a variety of other things that we'll talk about a little bit later. But I'm curious about the decision-making process behind that and why. I can imagine on one hand it's an area where you have a larger amount of competition from the ESPNs of the world to other local media. There's no shortage of ways to find out how the Red Sox did last night. But what other elements did you think about putting out for free, and what was behind the decision to put sports out for free?
Well, we looked at absolutely everything. We looked at where our traffic was on the site, where we were getting traffic from, and we looked at what was the value of that traffic in terms of advertising revenue as well. I mean, it was I think everybody on the panel knows it was an absolutely excruciating process of going through we did a full inventory of absolutely everything that was on our site, and then we went down it one by one. I mean, it seems like a long time ago, but now that you're resurrecting these memories, it's as painful as it ever was. And so, we went through all this stuff, and the thing about sports is that I think there's several factors. One, it's a big driver of traffic to Boston.com. That's just a fact. Number two, as you pointed out, there's a tremendous amount of competition in sports. And so while we might like to say, well, people should pay to see this, that would be great. But the reality is there's just a lot of competition. And so we have to recognize that, and we want to be part of people's reading experience, and we want to drive traffic to Boston.com. So to tell you the truth, the area of sports was a pretty easy one for us to decide. There were some others that were much more difficult. So.
Such as?
Well, you take hyperlocal as an area that we've emphasized over the last year or two, and we had to really think that through. We do have more competition in that area these days, too, than we had in the past. I think we're all familiar with that. There were, pretty much every area, because it was important that we keep traffic levels up to a good level on Boston.com. I mean, one of the first principles of doing this is do no harm. So a very important principle, by the way. And so it was important that we keep traffic up on the site. And everything, you had to decide whether, what about the Globe's content was really critical to Boston.com. And, and you had to make a distinction between what's in the Globe newspaper and what's produced by the Globe newsroom. And the truth is, there's a lot of content, a word that I despise, but a lot of journalism that's on Boston.com that's produced by the Globe newsroom, but it's not actually in the newspaper because it's breaking news during the course of the day. And the reality is that breaking news is tremendously important to the traffic on Boston.com. And we've been determined for a long time, and are even more determined today, to feed things to the web constantly during the course of the day. And that's journalism produced out of the Globe newsroom, but it doesn't happen to be journalism that necessarily is in the Globe newspaper.
Lisa, you've been with Boston.com in some capacity, in various capacities for quite some time. Mm-hmm. You've seen it change from having sort of its own identity to sort of being a home for the Globe in addition to having its own identity, to now having a new distinction from the Globe's content. I was speaking with one Globe person who I won't name, who said in praising BostonGlobe.com that Boston.com always had a personality disorder. It was lots of different things to lots of different people, and that BostonGlobe.com now has a very strong sense of what it is. What does that mean? What does that mean that Boston.com will become now that it is no longer going to have the newspaper's content to the same degree?
Right.
Does that open up Boston.com to evolve into a more page view driven, advertising driven position than what it's been in traditionally?
Yes, that's funny about the personality disorder. Love to know who said that. So, as part of the research, we did determine that there are two distinct audiences, and so we also did, in addition to the fun content discussions that we had about what was part of BostonGlobe.com and what stayed part of Boston.com, which would have been a great case study for a business school if we could have videotaped that, some analytics, and that it got a little emotional. So on certain things, but
that would be a case study for a personality disorder.
But I think the fun part for Boston.com now is to develop its personality and not be, I guess, as bipolar, one might call it. So the sort of immersive reading experience, the Globe journalism is really the hallmark of BostonGlobe.com. But also make no mistake that all the content on Boston.com is done under the supervision of the newsroom. While it may not all be produced by the newsrooms, so we are working with outside parties and bringing new partners to the table. It all has to meet the quality standards. So I think you're going to start to see. We did a brand architecture, and some of the characteristics of Boston.com, the next evolution, are that it's a little bit friendlier, a little bit more approachable, but also resourceful. So wherever you are in Boston, whatever you want to do, Boston.com will be your friend to kind of, to take you there and help you and give you insider info. So I think we did struggle a little bit with, are we this fun, irreverent site, or are we the website for the Boston Globe? And now there's an opportunity to move the brands further apart.
Particularly since there is so much news content that on Boston.com that is sort of similar in spirit to Boston Globe content. It just happens to be in a blog post instead of in an article. And I'm curious. One of the issues that stood out to me when I first saw BostonGlobe.com is in an attempt to create an experience that is more print-like and more familiar to a print reader. It, I think, risks pushing away all the wonderful webby things that came along with the development of the internet, include such as things like blogs. Is there a room for BostonGlobe.com to move away from being as print styled and to bring in blogs and the other sorts of things that aren't from the newspaper and aren't breaking news, but sort of have that spirit of of a traditional internet website?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely the plan. I'll kick that question to Marty because that's really his zone.
Well, you know, there is a lot of breaking news on bostonglobe.com, and that is coming out of the blogs. It may not say blog at the top or suggest blog, but it's actually a breaking news story. I think there are a lot of things that are webby about the site. In fact, it's interesting that a lot of people who've commented on the site have said that this is the pace setter for what a website will be. And at the same time, you're raising questions about whether this is webby enough. So, and I think that, you know, so there are a lot of web qualities. I mean, certainly video is on there, the way that photos are going to be displayed, your ability to choose which way you'd like photos to be displayed is all part of that. I do think that there is I think blogs has been part of the web for a long time, but we can move beyond the notion that in order to have a website, it has to be called a blog. And so I think there are all sorts of other things that we're going to do. You know, the other thing that I would just say on your previous comment about the personality disorder, so just is that if there's something if product that we produce has a personality disorder that draws 6 million unique visitors to the site a month to us, I'm happy to have more products.
We're fun to be with.
I'm happy to have more products with a personality.
We'll call that the Lindsay Lohan defense.
With a personality disorder, but you know, I don't think that's a correct characterization of it. But there were, you know, some competing forces on the site, and this has really freed up Boston.com to be much more of a community site, a town square, and all that implies, and to draw upon the community to actually contribute to the site, whereas bostonglobe.com is, as I've said before, more purely journalistic. That doesn't preclude a lot of web characteristics, but it is fundamentally about journalism and the Globe's journalism.
Okay.
I think what you're also seeing too, and it's again this notion about what's webby versus just what's enabled by digital. And one of the things that is enabled by digital is a lot more communication and dialogue back and forth. And so far, looking at where people are spending their time on bostonglobe.com, a lot of the opinion pieces are starting to pop. The New York Times had found something similar by moving their opinion pieces up on their homepage as well. And with the subscription site coming in October and the opportunity then to have comments and more conversation, you'll see that type of dialogue, which really is a digital or web-oriented type of way to communicate, really kind of, I think, come front and center as another major capability that exists within bostonglobe.com.
Michael, you were very involved in the development of the webbiness or non-webbiness of all these characteristics.
I prefer webbiness.
Webbiness. I think we all prefer webbiness. I've never seen a newspaper website redesign faced with the rapturous response among digital-oriented technologists and web designers as bostonglobe.com was. Lots of people who I have the suspicion have never enjoyed the design of a news website ever before like this. Right. And a big part of that was your use of responsive web design, which is essentially the idea that you can serve one web page and have it appear in an attractive manner at various screen sizes, from smartphone to tablet to laptop or desktop. I'm curious, it seems like the driving force of the emphasis on responsive design is the growing importance of mobile to everything that you're doing. Can you talk a little bit about what you've seen, what you saw in the development of the site in terms of the ways in which the use of Boston.com or BostonGlobe.com is different on mobile devices? How different a product do you feel you need to offer to someone who's on a phone and wants the latest news versus someone who is, you know, on a tablet or on a laptop?
Right. So I think it's a good question. I think one of the things that we spend a lot of time looking at is sort of two schools of thought. One is to say is you should create a different content experience for each device, and that you should really try and take into account the different use cases. So you may actually program differently for one device than another, or for a different use case. We chose to go the opposite way and to try and program the same content, but just have the appearance and the form factor be excellent across devices. You know, we had a lot of help. We worked with a couple of different groups. We worked with a company called the Filament Group. We worked with a company called Upstatement. We worked with our own development team a lot. And we worked with, we had a new content management system that we've put in the background in all of this. So pulling all of those things together was what enabled us to deliver on the responsive design.
In the last few years, one of the major responses of news organizations to mobile has been the creation of apps.
Right.
On iOS, on Android, elsewhere. Do you feel that having a lovely responsive design that looks great on my iPhone every morning eliminates some of the need to have a different app for each platform?
Chris, do you have any thoughts on that?
Sure.
We rehearsed that one.
Yeah.
I'm kidding. We didn't.
You know, right now the initial focus was on delivering a solution for the Boston Globe in the digital space that worked very well across all of these different devices, and so that's what we prioritized. Certainly, Boston.com has its own app solutions for smartphones, and we continue to look at really what audiences are out there and the ways that they'd like to read or interact with us, whether that's the Boston Globe or Boston.com. And so we're still sort of assessing where best to position ourselves. I think to the extent that we would come out with an app for the Boston, a dedicated app for BostonGlobe.com, it would not try to replicate what's already available in there. It would be trying to serve a different function that the readers would be looking to engage with us in a different way using that type of a device. So we're still, just to step back just a second, sometimes it gets a little lost in these discussions because BostonGlobe.com was such a significant product launch for us, and to your point, it's been very well received. But the strategy wasn't to launch BostonGlobe.com. Because if that was our strategy, we wouldn't have it now that we've already done it. The strategy was to separate the brands and build products underneath those brands that really connect with the readers or serve the needs of the advertisers to connect to the readers, depending on which the brand is. So consistent with the mission, consistent with the values of each of the brands, we're going to be delivering products. And so we'll continue to do research and continue to look for those different segments of readers and ways to connect with them under the brands. And so we very well may come up with some dedicated purpose-built device solutions, but those would be really targeting what a group who really would be looking for that solution from us.
I have a feeling I understand the difference between Boston.com and BostonGlobe.com, and I'm sure the four of you do. But I have to imagine there are an awful lot of people in the Boston area for whom the niceties of the differences between the two will frankly be lost. How much of a marketing challenge do you have, considering you'll be having some Boston Globe stories on Boston.com, but only a fraction of them? You'll be cross-promoting BostonGlobe.com from Boston.com, and frankly, the names sound an awful lot alike. What do you have to do to try and eliminate what I have to imagine is going to be a lot of confusion based on people seeing the same story in different places and not understanding the distinctions that make sense from a business perspective, but maybe don't seem immediate to a reader?
Yeah, I mean, they both have .com, so I guess that could be confusing.
And Boston.
Oh yeah, the Boston part too. I keep forgetting about that. The initial focus, and we're putting a lot of marketing pressure in addition to Lisa's other responsibilities. She's also our chief marketing officer, so she'd be able to take us through what the objectives are and how to get the message in the marketplace. But the overall goal about launching BostonGlobe.com was really to encourage people to go there and experiment and see for themselves. And there's no question that there'll need to be continued reinforcement of the distinction between them, but I think as the new product settles in, as BostonGlobe.com sort of settles into our overall set of products, and as we encourage people to move back and forth between them for different reasons, it will become more clear and a little less confusing sort of 2 weeks after we've launched in the future. But there's a lot of effort right now making noise in the marketplace.
Has anyone seen the marketing campaign for BostonGlobe.com? Okay.
Work to do.
Yeah. We have to look at our media mix.
So that, wait a minute, that means most people didn't read the Sunday paper, right? Because there was a double truck in the Sunday Globe as well as a strip ad.
You may not want the answer to that either.
Yeah, no, that's okay. With the marketing campaign, we also made a specific and deliberate decision to really not market Boston.com right now, because if we did have two marketing campaigns in the marketplace, I think it would add to the confusion. But one of the things that we're very clear about when we're creating marketing for BostonGlobe.com is that if you switched the logos, so if you put Boston.com instead of BostonGlobe.com, it just wouldn't look right. They have very, very different voices. So the marketing campaign that we have running right now on TV, radio, outdoor, print, online, maybe it's not in Harvard Square, so we might have to think
Probably
about that.
on the other side of the
but,
Charles.
yeah. So is about reading. It's about engagement with the journalism and the experience across all of the devices. We're getting ready. Michael and others are hard at work on a reimagined Boston.com that will launch next year, and you will see that campaign will have a lot of energy, personality, irreverence, humor in communicating it. So it's easy because you put the ads down on the table without putting a logo on it, and then you figure out which one, and you're just like, okay, does this feel right? So hopefully, as you see that campaign, you'll say, oh, that's what she was talking about. So.
This Saturday is the day in which the free trial ends for bostonglobe.com, and it will be up to you to decide whether or not to pay your $3.99 a week. One other thing happens on Saturday, as I understand it, Marty. There's in the footer of bostonglobe.com, there's a small link that says Boston Globe Insiders, something that hasn't been a particularly promoted part of the launch. And on the language there says, Boston Globe Insiders will provide members with access to exclusive editorial content, events with editorial staff, offers and events from Globe advertisers and other businesses and services. The program delivers experiences that will engage our readers with the Boston Globe and the community and about topics they are passionate about. So it's lunch with the City Hall reporter, or is it lunch?
Or me.
Yes.
Actually, right now, you can win dinner with Marty Baron.
Register now, and you should. You're entered in the contest to have dinner with me, which would be third prize, by the way.
Wow.
But this is sort of the thing that we hope to do is really, Chris already made mention of the kind, when you were talking about webbiness, that people having a dialogue with people on the staff. So we're going to have a lot of that on the site when we do start taking subscriptions. And we'll have a lot of access to people who work in our organization. So the opportunity to get together with us, to get together with sports writers and people from the arts. One of the things that's like probably first prize is Sebastian Smee, our art critic, sort of giving a tour of the new contemporary art wing at the MFA, things of that sort. And so we'll have a lot of that. We'll also have a lot of events in various locations, including at our own facility, where people will get to meet newsmakers they wouldn't otherwise meet, people who are prominent in politics or the arts or sports or what have you. And so it has certain membership qualities to it. Very much like you would find with WBUR or WGBH, that sort of thing. And so people who are subscribers will be part of this sort of group that has a more intimate relationship with the people on the staff, although not too intimate.
Will there be tote bags?
Huh?
Will there be tote bags?
We always have tote bags.
If it's a subscription, there will be
Yeah.
tote bags.
We're
but,
thinking, what's the digital equivalent of a tote bag? Maybe an
A picture of a
iPad
tote
cover
bag,
or
yes.
something.
Right.
Yeah.
But on a slightly more serious note, there have been news organizations that have tried to create greater engagement with journalists that have stepped on a few ethical landmines. The Washington Post faced some difficulties. As you're figuring this out, how are you ensuring that you'll avoid those issues? If I get to have dinner with a city councilman or go to an event with a city councilman, or have access,
I'm trying to imagine. We've thought of a lot of events. I haven't stumbled across one yet that creates an ethical issue for us that I'm aware of. I mean, I think that everybody on the panel certainly knows that I'm a real stickler for these kinds of things. You know, there are a lot of no, we can't do that. So I'm the one who says no, we can't do that a lot.
I'm the one that gets them.
It's the traditional relationship
Yep.
between advertising and editorial. But we just don't do that. I mean, look, I was at the LA Times when they had the whole Staples controversy, so I'm very sensitive to that. I observed what happened at the Washington Post. And we try to be pretty careful about those kinds of things. And I can't imagine an event that would create a problem for us. And if it has the potential of creating a problem, we're just not going to do it. There's so many other things that we can do.
Mm-hmm. I've spoken over the last few years with a lot of journalists, a lot of newspaper reporters who have had this vision of paywalls as the path to financial nirvana, as the one bold stroke that would solve the difficulties of the industry. I understand you don't have a public goal of how many digital subscribers you'd like to achieve, but just looking if you had 50,000 digital-only subscribers, that would be somewhere around $2.6 million a quarter in new revenue. The New England Media Group, which you're a part of, the biggest part of by a large margin, had about $100 million in revenue in the last quarter. So even in a fairly optimistic scenario, we're talking about a relatively small amount of money. Any money is, of course, welcome in journalism these days, but do you see this, the digital subscription model, as being a significant driver of revenue, or is this as much about print retention and giving print subscribers a reason to not walk away from their subscription?
I think that the answer is yes to both. It just depends on what point in time you're at right now. I mean, newspapers, the manufacturing portion of that is most efficient when the utilization is high. And because of the large costs associated with manufacturing that tend to work around big step functions, run the press can do 100,000 copies in the time window we have, let's say. I'm running 98,000, it's roughly the same amount as if I'm running 68,000. There's a handful of consumables on the margin there, but you've got a lot of your labor costs and a lot of your startup costs. And so managing around those step functions of cost is something that every institution, every media outlet has to worry about, who is a traditional manufacturing or traditional newspaper company. And so I think that what's going to happen is that there will be, we want to offer digital, we want to see what the readers want, we want to see how the readers are connecting with us at this moment in time and on into the future, and really driving engagement. If you look at what the contribution is for a newspaper that costs $1 and how much that supports the organization versus what the contribution is for a digital without the consumables and without the heavier labor costs, that's the way you start to look at the business, and that's the way you start to answer the question is, as we make this transition, will we be able to continue to thrive? But I guess I just would go back on one point. I've been doing this since '84. There's no silver bullet, right? There's no magic number. If all the classifieds would come back, then that would be a great silver bullet. But the classified advertising is not gonna all rush back to print. So the reality is that what we're looking to do is, through separating the brands, using those assets, launching the products, focusing on what readers want, what advertisers, what benefit we can deliver to advertisers, is to deliver value in the marketplace. And Boston Globe, whether it's in print or online, is really the prioritization of what readers want. It's a digital site that wants to be read. There's high levels of engagement that Marty's talked about the other way. We're putting our best foot forward for the people who care about journalism, and that is something that we feel very proud of. It's right in our wheelhouse, and it fits very well with our value proposition. If we have to make a handful of tweaks along the way, we'll continue to do that. But essentially, what we're doing is stepping out with support for the journalistic product and what is which is our differentiator and our biggest strength in the marketplace here.
Can I just say something about that, Josh? I have to say that it's been a very long time for me to hear that $10 million extra a year is a small amount of money. So it seems like a lot of money to me these days, and the alternative to, under your hypothesis of $10 million, and that's just a hypothesis, that the alternative to those $10 million in your hypothesis is not to have those $10 million. So, I think everything's a matter of perspective.
If you want to offer me $10 million, we can talk afterwards.
Right, exactly. I had a feeling.
That actually would not be unethical.
And on top of that, while it's not an advertising supported site, there's going to be advertising on the site,
right.
So you can add that in too.
Yeah. Let me ask a couple questions about pricing. First off, $3.99 a week is a fairly aggressive price in this weird world of online subscription models, higher than what the New York Times is asking for its base digital subscription, which is $3.75 a week. I'm curious how that decision was made, and I'm also curious if you've been able to see yet in the few weeks since it's happened any movement on print subscriptions. From my own example, I had not been a print newspaper subscriber for quite some time until March, when I became a print subscriber to the New York Times, because that is the cheapest way to get digital access. And now I guess full disclosure, became a Sunday only a subscriber to the print Boston Globe, because again, that's the most efficient way price-wise to get digital access. I'm curious, how did you evaluate getting that relatively high price point, and also how it relates to print?
So the price point really came out of the research. We looked at a combination, or the intersection of both kind of willingness to pay at that moment in time, which I think is actually on the rise in the digital space, and also at what price point. And And at some point, the intersection of those sort of hits a sweet spot, and that was conveniently for us at a place that's right around what we would charge for the Sunday only. And it gives us the opportunity to do some bundling and recognize that the value to us of a Sunday print subscriber is higher, frankly. And so that's something where we think it dovetails nicely with what the reading experience on Sunday is for many people, along with a desire for digital access. And so we package it up, starting first with the $3.99, and then looking and saying, how do we want to handle the pricing with our current subscriber base? And the idea there was to really reward or recognize the contribution and frankly the appreciation for the fact that we are an expensive print product. We're the second highest priced newspaper behind the New York Times, and we have yet still 88%, 89% of our subscribers have been with us for 2 years or more. So we have a very loyal print base. We've asked them to support us these last few years to varying degrees as we were going through our transition, and we wanted to make sure that we were recognizing that.
Lisa, I want to ask you, since I'm sure you've had conversations, probably lots of conversations with advertisers
Sure.
about this transition. On one hand, you're sort of where you once had one digital offering, now you have two to sell. And you also have one that is very likely going to have a much larger audience just because it is free than one that is going to be a different premium kind of audience. When you're having those conversations, and also on BostonGlobe.com, an ad unit is the only unit on the page, typically speaking, as opposed to being part of the larger jumble of the classic modern news site design. How have those conversations gone, and what have you seen pushback from anyone who wants to understand, has trouble understanding why they should sign up for this new product as opposed to the one that they've been with before?
Actually, advertisers have been quite relieved and supportive of the strategy because many of them use Boston.com as a critical piece of their media mix. So if you're Dunkin' Donuts and you're introducing a new colada, or you're JetBlue and you have airfare on sale, they do these really elaborate homepage takeovers on Boston.com, a significant piece of our revenue. And we've been getting a lot of questions over the years. When are you going to start to charge for Boston.com? When are you going to start to charge for Boston.com? Because we rely on that as a critical source. So we can finally say to them, we're never going to charge for Boston.com. We now have BostonGlobe.com, and it's a new way for you to advertise. So we've been, they've been, I wanted to know, so what are you going to do to keep the traffic up on Boston.com? And we've had a lot of conversations with them about the reasons behind some of the content rules, why we kept sports out, what some of the new content is that we're creating to drive more traffic and engagement to Boston.com. But we've also been really surprised at the response to BostonGlobe.com. In fact, all of the significant ad positions are sold out through the end of the year. So to your point there, it is a premium, elegant advertising integration. We had one customer, Caldwell Banker, who stepped up to sponsor the free trial. They wanted to be associated with the buzz that we were going to deliver with it, and we were excited that we delivered even more buzz than we anticipated with some of the reviews and commentary that we got from the design community. So they definitely got their money's worth for that. And then we have 4 advertisers that are part of have purchased the rest of the positions in the fourth quarter. So moving forward, what's exciting about it is we'll have this premium experience for advertisers over on BostonGlobe.com that will definitely command higher advertising rates. But we have the same registration profile across both websites. So we also have the flexibility that if you don't want to buy a contextual adjacency, you can buy audience. So if you just want to buy women within $4.95, for example, across the 2 sites, you can do that. So it really is giving us a lot more flexibility and choices for advertisers.
Okay. And one last question before we open it up to everyone else for Michael. The site's only been up for a couple weeks now, but I'm sure that someone in your position is spending a lot of time looking at the analytics to see how users are interacting with the site. I would imagine there would probably be a different sort of length of visit, maybe visits coming at different times of the day. Just what have you learned about how a BostonGlobe.com visitor is different than from a Boston.com visitor, with the obvious caveat that it's still free for a few more days, so we haven't quite seen the audience.
Right.
But the idea that design can drive different kinds of behavior. Has that seemed to be the case?
Right. So, you mentioned the free trial, and I think one of the things that we're seeing is that the numbers, it's hard to know what's real about the numbers in a large sense right now because it's a free trial. And so I think it's not a true representation of where things will ultimately be. I think one sort of little nugget we've noticed or can share is that sort of relative to Boston.com, iPad traffic seems to be trending higher on BostonGlobe.com than it does on Boston.com, again, relative. So that's sort of a gratifying thing because that's sort of one of our hypotheses is that it's a great reading experience on the tablet. And as Chris mentioned at the opening, I mean, it really works well if you're using it on a tablet. And so directionally, that seems to be going in that direction.
All right, well, let's open up to questions from the audience. I don't believe we need to have mics because I think we have enough mics in the room to pick it up for the live stream. So right here.
Hi. A big premise behind this change seems to be that there is that desire for full, I think you said full, you said immersive online reading experience. I work on online content at Harvard. When we see people come in, we're seeing shorter and shorter time on site, people who are sort of diving in from these social networks like StumbleUpon and Facebook, sort of consuming one thing, but pretty disloyal, agnostic about where and how they consume it. So my question is, and I really hope you have a good answer for this, because I love that. Yeah. Are you serving up a sumptuous Thanksgiving dinner in a world of Lunchables? Yeah.
Who wants to take that one?
Well, now I'll
Analytics,
start.
maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that we're encouraged by is that people are looking and responding well to the design, and that people have spent a lot of time on Boston.com who are reading the Boston Globe. Again, that we understand that was a portion of the audience to begin with, and we're seeing that the reading of news and information in the digital space is becoming much more mainstream. And so I would agree with you as up until at its infancy, starting in '95, a lot of people would just sort of say, "What did I find? Let me drop in and let me drop out." And I think what we're seeing is, as it becomes more mainstream, it becomes more of a different experience to print altogether. And so what we're looking to produce is the full storytelling that really does engage the users, and yet still supports the serendipity of being able to move through the site and pick up other things that are of interest.
I would say that yes, we are trying to serve a sumptuous dinner, and exactly that. But also that not every customer is the same, and not every person wants the same experience. And some people will pay, and some people won't pay, and some people are willing to settle for a different kind of experience, and some people would like a much more luxurious experience. Some people, they'll eat at different restaurants. They'll want different class on a plane. They'll want a lot of different experiences. And they'll buy, a different kind of bike. One will settle for, a $500 bike, and somebody else will want a, $5,000 bike. I mean, we've treated people on the web essentially as all the same, all get the same experience, no matter what. There aren't that many other businesses that do that. In fact, they have different kinds of experiences. The automakers have created different models for different kinds of people, and some of them have different brand names, as a matter of fact. So why not have that in the web world as well?
I would just maybe quickly to follow on. I think one of the things that we are trying to do as well to treat the audiences differently is we're recognizing that people will hopefully read longer, but also that people are time shifting where they're reading as well. So we have a feature called the My Saved feature, which allows you to save a reading list of stories that you want to read and then can access across devices. So recognizing that you may dip in, sort of scan a headline or two, but then say, oh, that's interesting, I want to read that later. So how that plays out is something that we're hoping encourages and makes it easier for people to consume more over a greater period of time.
Are there any publications that have really made the transition to digital and paywall successfully that you are looking to emulate? And I was wondering in particular if you looked abroad at all. I know that a lot of the British papers have been charging. And then the final thing is it seems like some papers that like with a captive audience, like financial papers, the FT and the Wall Street Journal, they can charge because people need to get access to their papers. Do you have any thinking along those lines for how you can make that work?
Yeah, I mean, just for starters, we don't really have any comparison to keeping a free site and launching the paid site. The other, at least the domestic ones that we've seen are more along the metered model, which we did take a look at. We actually have, from thanks again to the research, the recognition that more than half of the people who were coming to Boston.com didn't realize that they were reading the Boston Globe. And so we recognized that we had multiple brands and the opportunity to create very different reading experiences for those audiences. And no other market has really reached that conclusion domestically and done that yet. But so we don't really have anybody that we're following in that space right there. At that point. But I do think, and Marty can maybe speak a little bit more to this, that you mentioned the FT, you mentioned the Wall Street Journal, and the assumption is because they have sort of unique financial content, then people feel like that they can only get it there and they have to pay for that. Well, you know, within this marketplace, we actually have a lot of unique content too that isn't replicated anywhere else, and people who are covering this market just can't do what we do, and they don't do what we do, and that for us creates I think a similar opportunity, even though it doesn't fall so neatly in the well, it's the financial world that we're covering.
Let me ask you to take off your Boston Globe hats for a second and put on your newspaper pundit hat for a second. 2-3 years from now, are we going to see a situation where most large American newspapers have paywall strategies? Is this the trend that we've been seeing so far this year? Is this the beginning of the larger movement, or do you think that it's only these, you know, a few quality brands that can afford to try and pull off what you're trying to do?
Wow, I get to be a pundit. It was a while there.
It's a risky business, by
I
the
know,
way.
I know, wow.
Somebody's going to play this video.
I was gonna, can we just take this down for a minute while I punditize? You know, I think that the markets are different. You know, our recognition is that there's a series of national players, and they sort of have one set of opportunities, both print and digital, with their brands. There's on the more regional basis, regional players who are characterized a little bit differently. They tend to have not as much competition in the space. They tend to have 40, 50, 60% penetration in the marketplace, and their opportunities are a little bit different. And then you have the major metropolitan marketplaces, which are typically characterized by a significant volume, but a much larger, but yet bounded geography, and that creates a different set of challenges for each of us, and frankly at different points in time as well. So you know, I do think that what you'll see from all of the players is a rebalancing of the business model. Exactly who reaches which conclusion on how best to do that, I think will maybe differ by market. I would expect it would, as you know, Marty made the point that for a long time we had Boston.com as a one-size-fits-all. Well, we had the Boston Globe as kind of a one-size-fits-all, and all the newspaper companies would, because of the overhead with the manufacturing and the complexity of that distribution, would produce one product and tend to push it out. And it's really now looking, I think, at what the audience is, what the opportunities are, and crafting solutions in each of the markets that you'll see each of the different publications come back with. Because I think those are going to vary by market, as consumption habits vary by market, and the balancing of the business model there.
I'll go out on a limb and say most will not do it. How about that? And
See, this is why you're a better pundit. That was
right. That's right. I was way too long, and I know that. And so,
so most will not.
I'm going to teach them how to be a pundit later. But I would say most aren't going to do it because one of the most important character, or sort of overriding characteristics of our industry, is fear. And I think that people are not going to do it for fear of what might happen, and so they'll just wait to see what everybody else does. On top of that, there are, and certainly Michael can speak to this, I mean, there are technological barriers one has to overcome.
It's not
an easy thing to do. I mean, he hasn't had much sleep in many months, and it's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff to do, and I'm not sure that everybody's really equipped to do that. So, but mainly the fear component, I would say. So.
David, mine was too long.
I have two questions, and they're completely unrelated, so I hope that I can direct them to the respective people. The first one, to Marty, did you change any of the news gathering workflow or resources and processes of how you do your daily assignment with this new launch? And the second question, for Michael, and I guess for Lisa as well, is with the IAB standards and the ads, leaderboard ads, big box ads, and everything else, with this responsive design, how did you take that into account, and how did you work with advertisers and third-party applications to sync that up?
Take yours, Marty, and you can take.
Yeah, you
Uh,
can.
yeah,
Switch? Should we switch?
I don't even know what IAB stands for, so, and I don't want to know. As far as the news processes, that hasn't really changed at all. I mean, we were already in a mode of if it happens and it's breaking news, put it up on the web. If it's an exclusive and it's perishable, it's not going to stay exclusive for very long, at least until the next morning, then put it up on the web. So we were already in that mode. To the extent that anything's changed, we've sort of rededicated ourselves to that and say, let's do more, let's do better at that. The area where there's been some change, I guess, and it's not so much the newsroom per se, is for Boston.com, is that it's important that we bring in, we brought in additional material onto Boston.com, so new blogs, 24 new blogs and things like that. And we're really trying to make it a community site where people in the community contribute. And so we're looking for ways that can happen. And so that's not a change in the processes of the newsroom, but it's a change in our newsroom.
And one of you on, because I will say, from looking at bostonglobe.com on a smartphone in particular, that Coldwell Banker ad is huge compared
Yes.
to the units that you would normally sell for a mobile website.
Right. So the responsive design is a bit of a challenge for IAB units, especially the way advertising is purchased right now. So the way we sold it, especially through the end of the year, as we figure out what the traffic patterns are and what the inventory is going to be, is we didn't sell it based on we didn't sell someone a leaderboard or a big ad. We basically sold them a share of voice of the larger impressions, and they provided them in multiple sizes. So you don't buy X number of big ads. You just get 25% of all the impressions, is the way we've sold it to customers. So their ads do resize on the fly. So there's the same ad unit is resized across all the different devices. As we're starting to plan for Boston.com next year, where there are vastly more impressions, that's one of the questions that we have right now, is should we rebuild it in responsive design? And we think that the way advertising's bought may limit our ability to actually design the whole website using responsive design. So that's one of the key things that we need to figure out, because it's a little bit scary when you get ahead of advertisers in terms of the way you sell, because then you have to do a lot more education, and you really need to be available to serve what they want to buy when they want to buy it. If that makes sense. Is that right? Product
No,
guy?
you're right.
Am I
yeah,
right?
Yeah,
Okay,
just
good.
the very last thing is there's no third parties on the site right
Right.
now. So that helps narrow the scope a lot right now for us.
Over
Is
there?
it possible to know more about the traffic, the number of subscribers that you have, how many hits does the opinion page gets a day? More about your numbers.
We're actually not sharing those right now because it's so early it encourages, frankly, people to draw conclusions off of things that aren't really representative. And so at the moment, we're obviously, we're about 2 weeks into our post-launch. And so we're looking at that, and we are going to be sharing that, but once we feel like we've got a better handle on what the implications are, or what the traffic really means, as opposed to during the first 2 weeks of a free trial period.
What about the numbers before the redesign?
We didn't have bostonglobe.com before. This is a brand new product that we just launched.
Okay.
Right here?
Marty, it occurs to me you're going to be the only editor in America I can think of who's in charge of two rather different looking websites when this is all done, with two rather distinct missions. Are you working that out in your own head? You're going to cut yourself in half? You're going to have lots of mirrors in the office? How do you think you're going to as an editor?
Jim, thanks. Somebody would like to cut me in half, but no, I mean, I think they're both interesting models. They're very different, and I think that I'm capable of sort of understanding what the distinct missions are and making sure that we'll fulfill both of those missions, and I'm committed to both of them, and I embrace both of them. I embrace Boston.com with being a sort of a community site, sort of a digital gathering place for the entire community, and I understand that concept. I want to make sure that we fulfill that, we deliver on that concept completely. And BostonGlobe.com, I think I understand based on, whatever, 36 years in the business easily, and we need to deliver on that as well. And I think that we can do that. I think that we've been doing Boston.com for 16 years, and we've been doing the Boston Globe for whatever, how many years now? And so I think we can do that. I don't think that's a problem, really.
In-house, do you have some kind of written guidelines, to sort of philosophical guidelines on what you hope these sites will become?
We haven't written down the philosophical guidelines. We've discussed them a lot in a lot of the meetings that we've had at senior levels, but we've also, in the newsroom, we've discussed them with department heads over and over, and deputy. I hope.
Each site does have an editor.
And each site has an editor, and that's right.
Yeah.
And so what we've asked is, and I've had, we've met with those staffs, and we said, okay, well, here's what you're trying to achieve, here's what you're trying to achieve. You don't have to be the same. In fact, you shouldn't be the same. You need to keep in mind that there are very distinct kinds of readers here. And that's what we're encouraging. And if they begin to be the same, then we're, if there are any commentaries that we've made so far, it's like, let's make them more different. So that's kind of what we've said.
And one of the elements of this two-site strategy is that the editor of Boston.com gets to select 5 stories a day, right, from the print.
In addition to those that he gets automatically, right?
Right. I'm curious, now that you're 2 weeks in, have you noticed any trends about what those stories are? Are there particular kinds of stories that seem to be appealing to a free site audience?
Oh, to the free site audience?
Yeah, just in terms of what...
I got to say that, I mean, for the most part, he's been picking from the front page. That's
Validation
just the way
of your editorial judgment.
Apparently, that's
Straight
pretty
off
much
the
how
research.
it's fallen. I mean, there's some variations from that, but mostly from the front page. But we have a wide variety of stories on the front page as well. So.
The sperm donor story was a huge hit.
Well, we knew when we had a story about the guy who had 75 kids and was a sperm donor. We all joked.
Played well on both sides.
We all joked. I bet you're going to pick that.
Just from the kids
and
alone,
he
that's
did.
enough.
We signed up 70 new subscribers.
Exactly.
Right here in front, you right there. Yes. Oh, well, go ahead.
Okay.
Over there.
I know we were going to talk about sperm
I
here.
have a quick question about, obviously when you have a redesign, it's apparent that your readers are going to be able to notice very quickly the change, and it is very much geared towards the reader, right? You want them to consume the stories in a different way. I was wondering though if this has manifested in a different attitude within the newsroom, right? Do reporters and writers suddenly see their stories in a way that facilitates more thinking about the visuals, right? The visuals that go along with their story, the multimedia that goes along with it, and whether or not that's like impacted your workflow at all.
Right. Well, I think that's preceded the introduction of BostonGlobe.com. We were doing that before. We're doing a tremendous amount of video. We have a video unit. All of our photographers are taking video. A number of the reporters are taking video, including with the iPhone 4 or something like that. And so we were already oriented in that direction, and that's been a strategic initiative of ours, is to do that. One of the things that we've added here with BostonGlobe.com is to put an emphasis on data visualization, sort of collecting data and presenting it as sort of a narrative to readers and helping them understand trends and do analysis through the presentation of data. And so we're emphasizing that, and I think that will be a growth area for us. But in the area of video, it's been part and parcel of our newsroom now for quite some time.
You right here.
Thanks. I actually have 2 questions. The first is, when the paywall went up for the New York Times, Arthur Sulzberger was quoted as saying that people who got around the paywall were high school students and unemployed people who didn't care about news. But at risk of indicting my entire generation, I know very few people who pay for the New York Times. I know lots of people who read more than 20 articles a month. I know very few people who are paying for that ability, and I was just wondering, have you tested how easy it is for you to hack your own paywall? The New York Times is really easy. And have you built that into your business model, that there are going to be people getting around it?
So Yes, we understand the ways you can beat the system, and with anything digital, there's ways to beat the system, right? But I think, well, second piece of the question, yes, we have built that initially into the business model. What we're looking to do is to have a significant number of people experience the site, and we don't want to make that so cumbersome and heavy-handed that we discourage people from trying it. We think we're at an interesting point in time in consuming news and information in the digital space, where people have shown a higher propensity to pay, and we want to encourage the people who want to come and experience BostonGlobe.com and then either subscribe to print and get it for free, or subscribe standalone to be able to do that. So, what that means longer term, my hope is that what that means longer term is that more and more people see the value in it and they contribute appropriately. But Marty made the point earlier, there are different audiences out there, and for, frankly, the people who really don't want to pay, we actually have a site for them. We have Boston.com, and they can experience that.
Over here.
My question evolves from the experience of a reader of the Dallas Morning News. That is, I'm not a reader of the Dallas Morning News, but I like to read things that both the film critic, who was a Nieman Fellow here 2 years ago, and somebody who covers the situation in Mexico. And all of a sudden, I went on to check for a film review and found that this paywall. Now, I've never lived in Dallas. I'm never going to live in Dallas. And I don't want to subscribe to the Dallas Morning News. I would be delighted to pay, $1 for each story. Now, my question is, Boston is a very unusual place because it's so transient. It has the hospitals, education, technology, all of which the Globe covers very well. So by having this subscription model instead of a pay-per-view model, or an option of a pay-per-view model, aren't you cutting yourself out of some business, and did you actually consider that?
So more than half of the traffic that comes to Boston.com comes from outside of the market. And so we did take a look and recognize that there are a number of different affinities that drive people to Boston.com right now from outside of the market, whether those are people here who build a relationship with an institution or with a sports team and then want to continue to follow. So we did take a look at that, and there's a significant amount of information that's still available on Boston.com that is of interest to that more remote traffic. But the bigger question, I think, is that you're hitting at is the business model extensible to be able then for the people who are outside of the market to find what they want in the Boston Globe and be able to contribute? And the answer is yes. We aren't there with this product launch per se, or this pricing model, but that's when we talk about, or at least when I talk about, looking at the audiences and the readers and finding solutions that connect. That's ultimately where we're looking to extend to, is to find those solutions that, if it's worth $1 a week to you to be able to get the following sets of information, or to follow, just the sports coverage or follow the arts coverage, then be able to deliver you that as an option and have that be a solution for you. And if there's enough of people who are in that readership just like you, then that would become a product that we would prioritize and put out to market very quickly.
Yeah, Chris, I don't think it's a secret that even in normal times, newsroom reporters like to grumble about publishers and owners of newspapers, right? And that perhaps
not at the Boston Globe.
I'm talking about across the board, but that in recent years
Doesn't mean anything that I had dinner with Tyler.
I was going to say.
And I would guess that grumbling has grown in recent years, and reporters are thinking across the board that newspapers are not investing in the future, and they're not putting enough money in to ensure a good product. And I'm wondering if you're putting yourself in a position now, you're asking for a premium price, you're putting up a paywall, that this makes it even more important for you to make sure that you continue delivering a high-quality product for your readers.
Sure. I mean, if you look at the way we've been managing, we have tried to, as much as possible, keep the newsroom intact. We have a significant newsroom. It's certainly the largest by far in the region. It is one of the top. It is one of the top newsrooms in the country in terms of size. It is the top newsroom in the country in terms of quality. And so we have been charging a premium price in print for years, and I think that that's something that had given us the courage of our convictions to be able to support the pricing because of what we were delivering each and every day and the value that the readers had to it. In terms of what the newsroom, I think the way the majority of the folks in the newsroom look at this next step, I mean, Marty hit that point. What we're doing is really reminding everyone that what gets produced each and every day is valuable, and that's something that we want to continue to be able to do, and that we put a value on that, and we think that the people who are reading it also will see value in that.
I'm interested in whether or not the adoption of these various devices over the past 15 years have actually made Americans or North New Englanders read more serious news. Are Americans better informed, those who can afford the devices? Are you noticing any changes on Boston.com about what sections of the site people are spending the most time on in the sort of among the more serious content?
Well, we're really 2 weeks into it, so it's a little early to tell if there's been some sort of a shift on that.
But in Boston.com as well, I mean,
Well,
as more people develop, as more people adopt these portable devices, are you finding that there are more hits on the world news sections, the site, local news, style related? Are there any trends that have stood out over time?
Or what are the biggest page view drivers on Boston.com? Might be a different way to get at the same sorts of questions. What if we print out your analytics for the last year and look at the
I'm going to go with Tom Brady.
There you
Tom
go.
Brady? Ahead of the Red Sox?
Sports and local
Yeah,
news.
local news and
is what-
sports.
Right, is that about Michael?
Stayed the
Sports
same
and
over
local
the
news.
past
Yeah, sports and
15
local
years.
knows.
And
It's
I-
been-
Independent of the devices.
Yeah, I hate to, I like your theory about people consuming more world news, but
No,
we.
it's not a theory.
No, it's not a theory, she's lamenting,
Oh.
she's lamenting that we don't.
Yeah, no, well, you know, Boston.com, because the content changes so frequently, a lot of people during the day, when you think about what our traffic pattern is, right? You know, it starts in the morning when people getting up, it peaks around lunchtime, and then it has a peak again toward the end of the workday. And because the site changes so frequently, people come back many, many times, and they are getting quick hits of content. So we do create things that are quick page view turners for them, diversions, things to give them a little break during their workday. So we do find some of those features, whether they're photo galleries or people submitting their own photos or commenting on stories. That's the kind of engagement that happens throughout the site.
And I think that there, you know, we don't know. I mean, I'm not sure that anything we do is going to have an impact on whether people become more knowledgeable or choose to become more knowledgeable. What's that, or within this region, or anywhere for that matter. And you know, and I think that there's a somewhat of a myth that people, when they actually had a physical newspaper, that they were much more thorough readers of it. I'm not sure that that's true. I mean, when I was reporting, I would observe people who were, when I was reporting, say, at the Miami Herald or the LA Times, you know, and I'd see somebody in a coffee shop, I'd wait to see whether they stopped on my story, and you can imagine how crestfallen I was when they went like that. And these days, I keep thinking, gee, what if we counted page views for the flipping of the newspaper, like the way we count page views for looking at a web page? I mean, I'm not sure that people were that much more engaged with what was in the newspaper then than they are today.
I read 3 times more news with my iPhone, iPad, computer.
Well, good.
I've noticed a third
Let's hope that.
And on the timing issue, the peaking at lunch and the beginning of the day, in your research, when you were segmenting out the BostonGlobe.com type of reader, even though the data isn't there from BostonGlobe.com, since it is a print-like experience, is that more something that happens in the mornings before work and at home afterwards, or are you expecting to see the allotment of audience to look different on BostonGlobe.com?
I think it's too soon to call, but panelists, my theory would be that we're going to see more BostonGlobe.com traffic at night when people are using their their tablets. So I haven't seen a lot of reading tablet usage at work yet. So I think
Right.
people can still, you can still be on an Excel spreadsheet and then pop over to boston.com.
Right.
Alt
And,
tab. There
right.
you go.
I
Other
don't know,
questions?
other thoughts on that?
Right there.
All right, over the last few years, the Globe has cut back on foreign news coverage, probably because of budget constraints. And that's probably not a bad thing, since it tended to represent hegemonic interests anyways. But now that people can find foreign news coverage directly from foreign sources, are you going to continue to de-emphasize foreign coverage and promote local coverage where you're more directly able to cover it yourselves?
Well, there was a phrase there that everyone laughed at that I didn't quite catch, but in any event, at our peak, we had half a dozen people around the world, that's it. We took a lot of wire services, the New York Times, the Washington Post, AP, Bloomberg, Reuters, what have you. But as for ourselves, we only had half a dozen people overseas. And really, the Globe's foreign staff dated to the Vietnam War. It did not precede the Vietnam War. So it was a relatively recent phenomenon in the history of the newspaper. But you're absolutely correct that with the financial pressures that have affected our business, we had to make a choice. And the choice was that we either cut back local news or we cut back foreign news. And we chose to cut back foreign news. Not the volume of foreign news, but our coverage of foreign news, the notion that we at the Globe had to be the ones covering foreign news. So, and when we did research among our readers, did they expect the Globe itself to be covering what was happening in Iran or Iraq or wherever, when there isn't a sort of, at least not at the beginning of the war? The answer is, no, they really didn't expect us to do that. Did they expect us to have foreign stories in the paper? They did. And we continue to have quite a bit of foreign coverage in the newspaper. So I'm not sure that we're de-emphasizing foreign news, but we've certainly, in terms of allocating our staff, we have chosen to allocate it to coverage of this city and this region, and the kinds of issues that are important to this region. We've maintained a Washington bureau. I believe that we're the only regional newspaper in America that has its own Washington bureau. It's not huge, but it's still there. I always wonder whether I should mention that. But in any event, somehow I thought he would remember. But we cover the kinds of issues that have a direct bearing on this region. And so we had to make a choice. We made a choice, and I think it was a sensible choice.
But the creation of BostonGlobe.com, by asking for what in a web context is a premium, do you feel any pressure or impetus to try and create a more holistic news report than
Holistic meaning it has more
and include something, in other words, if you're trying to get someone to pay,
right.
Are they going to expect a different mix of content and a less regionally focused?
No, I don't think so at all. I think that there's a lot of foreign news out there. It's available on a lot of websites. I think our value proposition is covering this region, and that's what we've emphasized over the last several years. I think we emphasized it before, but we've emphasized it even more, and we're totally committed to that. And I think that's the reason that people will come both to BostonGlobe.com and to Boston.com.
So, yeah.
I'm just wondering, are the two pages being updated 24 hours a day, or what are the hours people are actually working on the site?
We update the site all the time.
Both of them, yeah.
Both of them.
I'm wondering if there's a fear, I guess not now, but maybe down the road, of perhaps, I guess the term digital divide is the best phrase I can think of. Not necessarily between age, because obviously young folks aren't reading the New York Times or Detroit News and Free Press on the web like I am, which the Detroit News and Free haven't done a paywall yet. But also, which is interesting, I'm wondering why they're not doing it. But also class, folks that don't have disposable income to get a tablet or an iPhone or what have you. And again, we can talk about it in terms of now, but I guess maybe we can project ahead 5 years. And what do you think our industry will be facing when you could potentially have people who have this disposable income get great journalism, and people who don't are getting it from television? I'm sorry.
Well, I think what you're seeing is the convergence of screens anyway, right? So how far. It used to be that that in the 70s, right, the proxy for poverty was color television set deployment, and so then that became not a good proxy anymore because they became ubiquitous as the price point came down and as the consumable, as consumers became able to treat that as just a mass commodity. And so you're seeing already that the televisions or the screens in the household are all becoming digitally enabled, and you're seeing a drive towards sort of an ever-on or an ever-connected experience that are really being funded at the infrastructure level. And so I think as I project out 5 years and get to be a pundit now for a second, I would say that actually what you're going to see is more ready access to connected digital mediums, and that we're by virtue of having an organization that has in its wheelhouse the ability to go and perform the journalism and do the storytelling, I think are well situated to continue to provide value even across the different devices and make that accessible to everybody.
But even aside from the devices, nonetheless, by creating a premium experience and a premium product, necessarily the demographics of people who go to bostonglobe.com are likely to be at least somewhat different from those who go to boston.com. Now, newspapers have always charged in print. It used to always at least cost a quarter. But does that concern you at all from the civic perspective of having different people have different sets of information available to them?
Yeah, I think we're looking, I mean, one of the things, we're so new into this space right now, but one of the things we've talked about is what different types of packages can we put together, whether that's an extension or frankly building on a newspaper and education type program, where right now we tend to treat that as a pretty passive environment, whether it was a print passive environment or now sort of a digitally passive environment, and how do we make that more engaging? Now that we have the opportunity to do that with some of the products and some of the technologies that are out there in the school systems, as well as looking at a variety of institutions, the opportunity for people to sponsor access to digital access to other institutions as well. So we are, and always have been, frankly, very mindful about trying to make sure that we keep our product accessible and available in a variety of different communities. And while you would look at what maybe some other markets had done when they were looking at managing cost on the circulation side, there was a tendency to say, well, if we don't sell enough newspapers, we'll just sort of pull out of those different marketplaces. And in some markets, that de facto became redlining. And we never did that. There is no place around where the city in any sort of a reasonable area with a reasonable amount of distance that you couldn't get the newspaper and don't have access to it. So we've been committed to that in print, and we'll continue to be committed to that in the digital space.
Right there.
Hi. There's been a healthy dose of new startups emerging, doing mobile reading and different types of apps that are making it easier to pull content from a variety of sites and customize it towards what users want to see at a given moment. And that's run into some friction with some sites like the New York Times, where they found that as a competitive threat. They would like to keep people within their experience at thenewyorktimes.com, at their app, and have really blocked those apps from actually using their content, despite the value they might add to the user's experience. What do you feel the Boston.com and the BostonGlobe.com would have in relation to these apps and these new viewing experiences, especially given the emergence of the paywall?
So Boston.com continues to be free, and Boston.com would continue to be an available source to whatever type of solutions provider was building something there. If you look at what the New York Times has done with the Washington Post and a couple of other papers, and we're participating as well with OnGo, there's an investment in a company that's delivering that sort of combined reading experience by pulling story information from a variety of different sources. And so it's not that the company's really averse to participating in those. It's making sure that it's consistent with the way that we're looking to have our content consumed and frankly be compensated for that. So we'll continue to look at that as well, and if there are relationships that we can strike and deals that we can that make sense for us and for whoever is the provider, then we're very interested in having those conversations.
We have time for one more question right here.
So you talked at the beginning about the redesign that you focused on going the opposite of trying to be use case driven, utility driven. I'm doing a new startup right now, but my most recent gig was running software engineering for ESPN Mobile.
Great.
And we have a different edit team
Yep.
for the mobile site managing the front page. Can you talk about why you went that direction to have one sort of content experience, one plan? And then, you talked a little bit about this as sort of the beginning, right? It sounds like there is going to be more utility and more use case driven sort of divergence between the two products. Can you talk a little bit about where you see that, what happens in the next 3-4 years? How are they going to diverge? What kinds of things are going to, what utility are you going to try to drive from each?
Sure, I'll start with the first part, I guess. We did spend a lot of time looking at the use cases, and what we see on Boston.com is that a lot of the mobile use is driven by news and sports, and as you probably saw on ESPN, very similar, right? Sort of the breaking news or the current information. And well, as Marty talked about earlier, both sites are updated 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There's a slightly different metabolism, I think, and Marty, I hope you agree, to the two sites in terms of, Boston.com really is, at Lisa referenced earlier, it changes a lot. There's a lot of change there. Whereas BostonGlobe.com is a slightly different audience, has a different focus. We don't want to be constantly changing that story up. So you came, you saw the story, you come back 5 minutes later, it's gone. That's not the experience that we want to have there. So I think it's much more about how do we program things that have editorial judgment and meaning to those, and that those are useful then when you have the time to engage, whether you're engaging at your desktop, on your phone, on your tablet. So for us, it goes back, I think, to what the mission of both sites are.
But I think to get to the second piece of your question, part of the reason why we made the investments, and Michael made this comment before, we put in a new content management system as well. So we're changing out the infrastructure to make ourselves more nimble, frankly, in both the print and digital space. And so what I don't know yet is what are the consumption habits likely to be for a regional news and information demand in 3 to 4 years. What I do know is we have to be, A, prepared to listen and get in front of responding to that, and B, have the infrastructure in place to be able to support that, and then C, have the skills and the talent and the ability to be able to connect those solutions with those readers. And so that's the way we're looking at it now. This is really, it's a first step on really sort of a long journey. It's why the strategy wasn't to launch BostonGlobe.com, but to begin that process.
I'm also really intrigued by location for Boston.com moving forward. So from a mobile use case perspective, so are you somewhere in the Back Bay and we can tell you all the places that the Globe's reviewed, where are your friends, what are the tweets around here, what are the deals from where you're standing? So I think that's a very different use case than when you're at your desktop. So we're definitely going to be doing a lot of, people have been saying for years that this is the year of mobile in terms of advertising. I'm still waiting for it. But there's a lot of talk about location in the advertising community. So it's something we're interested in.
Well, terrific. Well, I'd like to thank all of our guests for coming. And thanks to all of you, and there are refreshments outside. I hope you stick around for some conversation.